Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp. My name is Glen and today we've got another one of our buy or avoid lists for you. If you're new to the channel, the way this works is I will look at a few games that have been released, some of them recently within the last week or so, some of them a little further back, and I will give you a brief synopsis of the game, my thoughts and opinions on it, and tell you whether you should buy, avoid or wait for a sale. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. First up then we have Zombie Panic in Wonderland DX. This is a third-person arcade shooter in the same vein as something like Wild Guns. You move your character across the bottom of the screen with the left stick and aim the reticle for your weapon with the right to take down hordes of enemies while holding ZR to shoot. There are weapon upgrades available that can be cycled through and a handy evasive move executed by pressing B. You play initially as Momotaro, I think I pronounced that right, a character from Japanese folklore, but you can also unlock alternate versions of Red Riding Hood, Snow White and Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. The game has a story mode and completing levels here opens them up to be played in arcade mode, where they can also be attempted in local co-op. It's a great amount of fun and I really enjoyed my time with it, although I will say that I found it difficult to be precise enough using the smaller sticks of the Joy-Cons. Plus I also find it a bit odd that considering this was a Wii game where it had gyro aiming and it was on the 3DS where it had touch controls, both of these are absent from the Switch version, with you only being able to use the analog sticks. Nonetheless, this is a very good time and I would recommend it as a buy. Next we have Boot Hill Bounties, which is a game I really wanted to do a full review on when it came out last week, but the code came in just a little too late, by which time other things had come up unfortunately. Now it's an RPG with a really interesting Wild West setting. You play as the Kid as well as his friends Doc, Moon and Rosie as they attempt to take on and defeat the local gang. It has a really beautiful 16-bit-esque aesthetic with colours that pop from the screen and a soundtrack that really sets the mood well. Gameplay wise you will be traversing the areas, looking to progress the story and levelling up your characters by defeating enemies. The combat system is real time as opposed to turn based, with an action bar that fills up at different speeds depending on the move you are trying to perform, very similar to something like Child of Light. You can gauge when you think the enemy is going to attack based on their action bar and use a dodge move at that time to try and reduce the amount of damage you take. You have 4 moves initially and will unlock more as you level up, although you must choose a move to replace when you gain a new one, a bit like in Pokemon. The mix of a more original setting, lovely artwork and a more action based combat system really won me over, and at about £12 or your regional equivalent, I would recommend this one as a buy. Next then is Ultrawings Flat, which is a flight simulation game. You will ultimately have a choice of a few different vehicles, although you only start with one, as you partake in missions to earn flying licenses or just use the free flight mode to explore the island. You can play in a first person view or from behind the vehicle, which is nice. Completing missions will earn you money that you can then use to buy more airports around the island and expand your empire. This game originally came out with virtual reality capacity for the PlayStation VR and the PC, and whilst I haven't played that version to compare, this standard version feels very difficult to control at first, and I would hazard a guess that tilting your head to look around feels more intuitive than the twitchy nature of having to use the right stick. You can hold down ZL to enable a gyro controlled camera, but it's still a bit too twitchy. This doesn't make it a bad game, and to be fair, playing in third person mode and flying through rings filled the pilot wing shaped hole in my Switch library for a little while, and at $14.99 it's not a bad price. There is a physical version available which I see quite regularly for around £10 to £12. If you have no way of playing the VR version and are interested, I would say either seek out the cheaper physical version or wait for a slight sale. Joe & Mac Returns is the second arcade outing for the Cavemen Friends and comes via the Johnny Turbo arcade range from Flying Tiger Entertainment. Now, I'd only ever played Joe & Mac on the Super Nintendo, and the first one is one of my favourite platformers on the system. This arcade sequel, however, isn't actually a platformer, and it's most similar to the original Mario Bros. Game, where you must defeat all the enemies on the screen before being taken to the next screen to try it again. You hit enemies with your club to stun them and then collect them up, and pressing A again will launch any collected enemies off in a large ball, which will defeat any enemies it subsequently hits. The more you collect up, the higher your points total. It gets a little repetitive after a while and isn't as much fun as the platform variant in my opinion, but with 2-player local co-op it's certainly an enjoyable time. Plus it has those lovely chunky arcade sprites that still look great to this day. If you do enjoy pick up and play titles, then you could do a lot worse, although it's a little bit expensive for what it is, so I would say wait for a sale. Next is the Double Dragon Kunio-Kun Retro Brawler Bundle. This is a retro compilation of various games from the Double Dragon, or the Kunio-Kun, perhaps better known on these shores as River City Ransom or Street Gangs series. It includes well-known games such as Double Dragon 1, 2 and 3, as well as River City Ransom, plus spin-offs such as Super Dodgeball and Soccer. It also includes a whole host of games from the series that never saw a release outside of Japan, and they have actually been localized for this release, which is great. I showed my daughter River City Ransom as she loved the new River City Girls, and it was really nice seeing her enjoy the primitive sibling to that game just as much. I will say that the default controller layout is quite possibly the most confusing I've ever known in a game, with plus and minus being assigned to X and Y. This meant it took ages just to get past the menu screens. You might want to configure this to something a bit more natural. All in all, for fans of these series, it's a great compilation, with a first look at many games that may well have been inaccessible for a long time in the West, but it's also incredibly expensive. I think this saw a physical release in Japan, so for this money, to be honest, I'd be looking to import or waiting for a big sale. Next we have Trailer Trashers, which is an arena-based deathmatch style twin-stick shooter. It offers a variety of game modes that can be played against human opposition in local multiplayer or against AI bots. You use the right stick to aim your weapon, but you do need to press ZR to fire, and you must have the most kills or least deaths by the end of the timed round. My main issue with this game is just how difficult it is to keep track of what's going on. The action is incredibly frantic, which isn't a bad thing, but when you die you respawn at one of a few locations, and sometimes by the time you've located where your character has been put, they've been killed again. The camera also jolts around in quite an uneasy fashion, which doesn't make for pleasant viewing. There is a screen shake option which I assumed was causing this odd sensation, so I turned it off, and to be honest it didn't look any different. As well as the standard last man standing or team deathmatch modes, there are also a few more party oriented games as well, such as Shotgun Soccer, which I thought may be a bit of fun, a bit like blow football you used to play with a straw, a screwed up bit of paper and the salt and pepper pots for goals. But it's just a bit all over the place, to be honest. AI partners are scoring own goals, it's incredibly difficult to move the ball with any accuracy, and it just isn't a huge amount of fun. The last man standing mode was decent, to be fair, but I would struggle to recommend this unless it's on a deep sale, and for me, unfortunately, it's an avoid.
Double kill!
Next we have Rover Wars, which is from the same developers as Trailer Trashers, although to be fair this one fares a lot better. It's a bit of a throwback to RTS games of the past, with you needing to collect resources, construct buildings and ultimately destroy the enemy base. You take control of a small rover unit, and this has a basic attack that can destroy enemy drones or the rover unit of your opponent, and destroying these will gain you resources. These can be spent on a number of buildings, such as a melee building, a bomber building or a rocket building, and you need to edge towards the enemy base without leaving yours open to attack. If your rover is destroyed, it will respawn by your base, and whilst it's certainly not perfect, I can see those who enjoyed RTS games back in the day having some fun here. The best part is that it supports up to 8 players locally, which would no doubt lead to some hectic battles. Personally, I would wait for a sale on this one, just because I'm not the biggest RTS fan, but if you are, at around £9, I think it would be a fairly decent buy. Finally then, we have a game called Shiftlings Enhanced Edition. This is a cooperative puzzle-based platformer. You play as two aliens attached to each other by a cord, and one of them needs to be inflated at all times. You can switch between who is inflated and will need to do so in order to overcome obstacles in the level. When inflated, a character can no longer jump, but they can pull the other person towards them. You can also bounce on the inflated alien to reach greater heights. This can be played in one player, but is also a lot of fun in two. The footage you are seeing is me playing alongside my daughter, and it was a good game to play with her because of just how important good communication is in order to be successful. She needed to listen to her role and carry out the instructions, as well as offering her advice to me as we tried to solve each puzzle. It's quite similar to Unravel 2, which is also available on the Switch, but to be fair, this is a fair bit cheaper than that game. At around £12 with 55 levels, this is a buy for me if you are looking for a good co-op game where communication is key.
Checkpoint Alpha. These handy stations of retro bioengineering will slice and splice our boys back to relative tip-top shape should they meet an untimely but inevitable end through one of the many gruesome hazards that come with the glamorous life. Oh, you're not.
So there you have it. I think there were 8 games in total in the end. A few buys there, a few wait for a sales, and just the one avoid, I believe it was, which is good. Have you played any of these games, and if so, can you offer a differing opinion? I'd like to hear it. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Wherever you are, I hope you're staying safe and continue to do so. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.